I took my master's program about 14 years ago. And one of the biggest messages that I learned from that was an idea of enduring understanding. What will students know in 20 years? What will they remember from your class? Well, that changed everything that I did. What I started to do is I started to really concentrate on important things like the standards and our targets and big concepts. And what I was forgetting in doing all this is the relationships. My name is Nick Hahn, and I've been an art educator for over 20 years. And I'm excited today to share with you my biggest takeaway from the pandemic, from maturity, from years of experience. And it is creating relationships in the classroom with your students, making it a safe environment for all through very fun things that I like to call penny games. I've had the opportunity to be a podcast host for the Art of Education. I was the podcast host of Everyday Art Room for about 2.5 years. Jonathan Jervich was one of my guests at one point, and he actually had another podcast on the Art of Education called The Art of SEL, and it still remains in their archives. It's definitely one that I would recommend listening to. I think there's only like 8 episodes. Very good information. I also saw a TED Talk by Dr. Rita Pierson. She is very charismatic and tells it like it is. That's where the title of this session came in. Students learn from who they like. Let's listen to a little clip of her and what she had to say. And definitely, I would recommend going and checking out the rest of her TED Talk because it's phenomenal.
James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like.
Her words are so powerful. One of the other big influences or inspirations for the penny games was from my husband. Tim Hahn was a tech ed teacher for ISD 728 for many years. Now, currently, he's working with the district office. He was in charge of giving us an icebreaker from one of our professional development days. It was actually a lot of fun. All of us kind of had our arms crossed to begin with because it's professional development and we're going to resist, right? But what happened was our arms had to come down because we had to play these awesome tiny games. I decided I was going to bring their ideas into my classroom. Now, I know what you're thinking. I only have X amount of time with my students. For me, I had an hour class period with every class that I had. I have 25 sections. I taught 800 students and I had 60 minutes with each of them. So that gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. Without a doubt, there is no better use of my time than these penny games. One of the games that we played involved pennies. So I decided to grab the pennies from our house. We had a jar of pennies and I started handing them to students that were doing desirable behaviors. So one week I would decide I'm going to look for students who are being kind to others. And I would hand them a penny throughout the hour. The next time I would say, man, the room's getting really destroyed. I'm going to look for people who are cleaning up and making it nice and tidy. Often I would tell the students ahead of time what I was watching for. And that really helped them. They didn't feel like it was a mystery every time. They knew exactly what I was looking for. Other times I had a game that was appropriate for the whole class. So I would say today the penny game is for a whole class. Let's try to earn that as a group. And then other times I had like a table that was just phenomenal, maybe 2 tables. Maybe I'd have them play the game against each other. It really depended on the game or my organization because sometimes I just didn't get the pennies out to the kids. And it sounds like a lot, right? Creating a game for 25 classes every single week. But The thing was, I was able to repeat most of the games that I did. Some games were like more appropriate for a younger audience versus my fifth graders because I was teaching kindergarten through fifth grade. Sometimes it would work cross grade. For all students, if I had a game for the week that was more appropriate for my kindergartners and my fifth graders, I knew weren't really going to enjoy this one as much, I might repeat a game that I've done in the past. So there was lots of different ways that I experimented over the year of how to implement these penny games. But nonetheless, I played a penny game every hour of every class period, most of the time. Of course, there were times that the students maybe didn't get the room cleaned up in time, or maybe it was just a really rough class period. I have high expectation for citizenship in my classroom, so I'm not going to reward a class that was having a really struggling that class period with maybe citizenship or kindness with each other. So there were times that the penny game was not played, but most of the time the class would come in next week and make sure that they earned that penny game because it was that important to the students. If you are in a session with me, we're going to play these penny games. That's the best way to learn, right? Is to actually do it, be hands-on with the penny games. But if you are not, if you're watching this in an AfterPass or if you're just watching this to kind of understand the penny game in general, then what I'm going to do is just present you with a quick overview. It's not going to be a clear explanation of every game, but it's going to give you an idea of what the penny games are and allow your brain to start thinking of new ways to implement maybe some kind of relationship building activity into your classroom as a routine. These games were so fun for my class that I wanted to make sure that I really archived them. So I have them available on Teachers Pay Teachers. I'll have the links, of course, in the message below here on YouTube or in any resources that I'm handing out for a presentation that I might be giving. In my resource that I offer on Teachers Pay Teachers, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of what that looks like and maybe a format that you might want to use in your class. So I always start out with the title of the game. I always have a page that has the materials, and I like to have the visual idea of the materials so that I can remind myself, first of all, but I could use words, but my non-readers, my youngest students, the pictures really help out to have them gather the materials that we need for the penny game. Then I give a how to play. So I just give a short explanation, and I do use just words in this format, and I will always read them to the students. Then in my resources, I always include a demonstration. Because I was able to do this for a whole year, I was able to record the happenings in my classroom, and it was a lot of fun. I really captured some amazing moments in my classroom trying to record the penny game so that I could do two things: share it with you, other people, and then mostly share it with other classes that I was teaching. Right now, I have 4 different versions, and I have a bundle of the penny games that I offer on Teachers Pay Teachers. Each of these bundles or each of these lessons include 5 different penny games in them. What I think I'll do for this video is just give you one example of a penny game from each of my series, and then you kind of get an idea of what these penny games are and what I have in each of these series. Penny game series number 1 has a game that I like to call Tiny Hand Pass. This is my handbag. Literally inside here, I have tiny hands. I wasn't joking. They're called finger hands on Amazon. They are super fun. I use these for a lot of things. I actually have tiny hands and even tinier hands. I mean, it's become a problem. I have tiny feet as well. But okay, besides that, what I do with these tiny hands is so much. Sometimes I demonstrate under the camera using my tiny hands, which is gross and so engaging to students. Sometimes I hand these out, and when students are talking about their art, they're actually using the tiny hand to point to the different things that they're talking about. These come in handy for a Sorry, no pun intended. Yes, they come in handy for a lot of things, but I use them for my penny games as well. So, Tiny Hand Pass is just taking objects. I used some fruit that I had for observational drawing, and they had to pass the fruit. So they put the tiny hands on, they grabbed the fruit, they gave the fruit to another person, and it kept passing around. So it can be any object at all. Penny Games series number 2 includes one that you'll need chopsticks, craft pom-poms, a container to put the pom-poms in on one side of the room, and a container to put the pom-poms in on the other side. I actually used like a big plastic bin for all the pom-poms on one side, and on the other side of the room I had trays for every group. I ended up doing this whole classroom most of the time, depending on the class, but most of the time it was whole classroom. I had students go over, use the chopsticks. They had to use the chopsticks to take a pom-pom, bring it back, put it in their group's tray, then bring the chopsticks back to their table, pass them off to the next person who repeated the same thing. And of course, I'm looking for the most pom-poms in the containers in the group, and that would be the winner of that game. Penny Games series number 3 has a game called Stick Swap. Stick swap, you can either use yardsticks. I happen to have a bunch of yardsticks around, so that's what I used. Or if you have brooms, like long sweeping brooms, a couple of them, maybe 4 to 8 of them, that works really well as well. I know that some of you have those things in your classroom right now. So how this worked is we had partners, and the partners would stand apart from each other, and they would each have a stick placing down, and their hands would be holding it. I would say 1, 2, 3. They would let go of their stick, run to get their partner's stick before it fell down. If they were successful at this, they took one step back and they tried it again. I actually gave them some practice before they had to do it for the competition. You definitely need some room to play this one. It gets kind of crazy, but a lot of fun. Penny Game series number 4, one of the games that we play in there is called Paper Rip. You're going to give every student a piece of paper that's about the size of a Post-it note. I actually used Post-it notes, but you don't need the sticky part at all. And what I did was, this was a timed event, so I ended up using a timer, turning it on for 1 minute, and students carefully ripped to see who could get their paper to be the longest. I gave them no tips of how to do this, except I did hold up my paper just to show them that I could make it longer. I set the timer, told them to go, and the class usually grows silent. They're very carefully trying to rip their piece of paper. This most often I play as whole class. So at the end, we would hold our pieces of paper. Whoever had the longest at your table would come up to the front. Then I'd have person number 1 measure up to person number 2. That winner would move on, the other person would sit down. And then person number 2 would measure up with person number 3, and so on until we had a winner. You know, I've been talking about these winners for the Penny Games, but I haven't told you what they win. They win a high five from me. I know, you're jealous. No, really, that's all they need. They need a little recognition. We win to win, and then we celebrate with each other. We celebrate with the winner. We say good job to the people who didn't succeed this time, and they give me a high five, and we move on with life. I want to tell you a couple of other things other than my handbag that you might want to purchase for Penny Games. You can design your own, definitely. Beat That is an amazing game. It has cups in it. It has ping pong balls in it. It has chopsticks. It has a lot of the things that I've mentioned already. And it has some cards that tell you different challenges. So you can just purchase this game and use it for your classroom. Just know that you might have to replace some of the items because they were not intended for, hundreds and hundreds of kids to use. But for me, Beat That was an amazing purchase for us, for our family, and we actually play it as a family once in a while. Another game that I own is called Headbands. I used to play this with my kids when I was little, when they were little. We'd put this on our forehead, put a card in here, and you could ask yes or no questions. Am I alive? Am I small enough to fit in a hand? Am I outside? So you ask questions until you come up with the answer of what card you have on your forehead. I actually use this in my class for like the last 5 minutes of my class on a regular basis. I will ask the questions, put my card in here, ask the questions, and ask students to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yes, no. It's a lot of fun. Students think it's so funny when I don't know what the card is. And actually, it's a lot of fun for me. I did use this a couple of times when I had students, actually in one example of a game, I have students have a string off from their headband with a hook at the bottom. That hook happened to be candy canes, and they had to hook other candy canes and bring it over to another location and place them into a different bin. So these I used once in a while, but I actually use this a lot in the classroom, and it's actually readily available at Goodwill now. So take a look. If you see headbands, go ahead and grab it. So that's the what, the why, and the how of penny games. Again, my name is Nick Hahn. I am available on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the places. Feel free to reach out with any ideas or questions. I would love to celebrate with you on social media if you implement any of these penny games. I absolutely love that. I have been hashtagging these as penny games. So if you want to hashtag it, that would be fun to find what other people are doing for their penny games. And I hope you create some amazing relationships with your students this year.